Disclaimer, the views of the guests on the show are not necessarily the views of the host of the Work With Me podcast. Everything you need to discuss from the employee-employer side come to life on the Work With Me podcast. Interact with us at workwithmepodcast.com. Now live on tape from outside New York City and Philadelphia is Larendee, Ruth, and Bob Stye. Welcome to the Work With Me podcast. And I guess on our first show here, Larendee, we're kind of explaining who we are and why we're doing this. So who are you? Why are we doing this?
I wanted to create a podcast, and this is something that I've been looking at, dreaming about for more than 5 years. I've tried a couple of different avenues to do this, and like I always say, you know, good things come to those who persevere and are patient with the process, and here we are. So the whole idea really, Bob, is to look at how people play in this sandbox called work, from the break room to the boardroom, and all of the players who are involved, the employees, the executives, the managers, and what inspires them, what motivates each of them to show up to do the work that they do. And it might surprise executives to learn that what motivates and inspires them is not the same thing that inspires the teams that they work with. And so we're all about getting alignment here, and in our recruiting business, we're about making good marriages and good matches. So we just thought it would be really fun to get together and learn from people who are doing this thing called work.
Now, for those of you or for people out there who are just checking in the first time, tell them a little bit about your history and all the consulting, your whole history of this, because it's quite fascinating.
Oh, it's a long journey, Bob, but I started when I was 9 years old with my first entrepreneurial venture, and I gained a paper route, and I hired a mentor, Mrs. Kerry. Actually, Mrs. Kerry found me, and she taught me how to run a successful paper route, from selling the papers, delivering the papers, collecting on the papers. And even back then, I was really excited and intrigued to figure out what I could do to get people to buy my papers and pay on time. And from, I had that paper route from the time I was 9 until I was 12. So for 3 years in Wyoming, 30-degree below weather, delivering those paper routes, those papers. And then, so I've worked since I was 9 years old, and people are surprised, and I think they often don't believe me, that I have never had a job that I didn't like. Now, there's been some jobs that I loved, but I've never hated a job that I had, ever. I always found a way to engage in whatever I was doing and to learn with whatever I was doing. So kind of the end of the story is now I am the founder and CEO of Ruth Advisors, which is a full service consulting and recruiting and education firm. And we are in the business every day of helping people discover the spark within them to help them, whether they're a butcher, baker, or candlestick maker, show up and do amazing work.
Well, my path is very different. Larendee started working when she was 9. I will be straight honest. I did not get my first job until the summer I graduated high school. And that job was at a video store that sold pornography as well. So
nice.
I took a different path where I was pretty much lazy. I went to college where I really fell in love with the radio industry. And in the years I spent up in New York, besides drinking with every day that ended with a Y, I excelled myself in the radio industry, which has been my part-time job for a while. Meanwhile, full-time, throughout the last bunch of decades, I've done about every job you can imagine, from selling long distance, working in a record store, to working in a call center and beyond. During that time, I've been on both ends, where I've been promoted and I've been called into meetings with HR with my termination papers. The one thing I've learned is when you're called into a meeting and HR is sitting there, they're not pulling out a cake to wish you a happy birthday. And we'll talk more about that as time goes on. I fell into the recruiting industry by chance in 2004, and it has been an adventure. I have more stories to share, but it's really been a crazy ride with me. I've been on both ends of the employee and the employee end, and I'm going to take the perspective of both ends in this crazy thing we called work, in probably the most bizarre time ever for people looking for work.
Yeah, I'm excited to explore this, Bob, and we're excited to bring on some exciting guests both employers and employees, and have them share again their stories of inspiration, insight, and some of it will be, we hope it'll be fun, right? That it'll be entertaining and real. So, and I just also want to share that I didn't go from a paper route to owning my own company. I also, Bob, did a lot of different jobs during that time. So don't want anyone to think I jumped from a paper route to owning a company. But one thing's for sure is that whatever job I had, I pretended like I owned the company. That's how much it meant to me. So we're excited to explore this together.
And the best thing for me is I'm not under any contract, so the stories I have are mine, and I'm allowed to share them, I think. And there are going to be some great stories I'm going to share with you, and I'm sure you have them as well, just from trying to work in this crazy world. And as she mentioned, we're going to get some exciting guests. And if you're interested, if you work at a company, and not only just promoting your company, but joining us on a roundtable about employment, about jobs, get in touch with us on the workwithmepodcast.com, and we'd love to have you aboard.
So, Bob, we're excited to have Kerry Leo as our guest today. And after a decade of classroom experience in public schools, Kerry Leo founded Davinci Education and Research. She's also a local presenter, noted speaker. She captivates audience with her vast knowledge and enthusiasm. She has developed all of the work that Davinci does in her company. She works with school districts, medical research facilities such as Einstein Medical Center, parent organizations, educational conferences. She's an educational therapist and diagnostician, and she has also has a longstanding member. She's a longstanding member of the International Dyslexia Association. She earned her Bachelor's of Science in Management Marketing from Siena College and holds a Master of Education from Dowling College. But Bob, the thing that I'm most excited about sharing about Kerry is her ability to lead teams and to validate the research, but also to help them step into their magnitude. So welcome, Kerry Leo. Kerry, welcome to our program today.
Hello, how are you?
We are good. Now, it looks like, according to your bio, in a former life, you were very involved with the education system. Tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah. In my former life, that's funny. Does feel like that these days in my former life. I started out in marketing as a marketing major and worked in Manhattan for a little bit, but quickly moved over to the education field. And quite honestly, I really don't know. It was the universe that put me in that direction, because I never had any desire to be a teacher or go into the teaching field really at all. I met someone who talked about, going back to school to be a teacher. I went, that sounds like fun. And so I did it. And I worked in a high school for a little bit. And then I kind of worked at every level in a public school from the special education arena until I started the Davinci Center with my friend about 18 years ago. And it's been a wild ride ever since.
Well, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about what your company does?
Sure. So we are a full-service educational company that provides both school district service-based support as well as support to students and families in the private sector. Mm-hmm. On the school district side, we do everything from professional development, training teachers and staff, to do some innovative instruction, diagnostic and prescriptive instruction, what we call it. We are specialists in the area of dyslexia, so a lot of our foundation came from that, but it quickly moved more into what we like to call these days problem-solving model, that, we're about looking at student learning and student learning environments and helping teams and individuals solve problems for, why they can't be learning more efficiently and more effectively. And then we also have a clinic, and on the clinic side, we support, clients from the families and students who need something extra or guidance, what have you. So we have like a learning center, we would say. We call it a clinic, but it really is a learning center.
Now, how many people do you hire or displace, or how big is your staff?
I have about 37 staff members now that range anywhere from the office core, who are kind of running the whole engine, to the consultants at large, let's call them, the tutors, the consultants who are out taking like case by case work for us.
So you handle all the HR matters as well, the hiring, the firing.
Yeah.
All that good stuff. 'Cause that's what we focus here on this. Larendee will talk a lot about some of the concerns from the employee side, me more the employer. But I do like to open with one question before I give Larendee a chance here. And how, in all the years you've been doing this, what is the story that stands out the most? What was the worst reaction you got to when you dismissed somebody?
When I dismissed somebody.
Or when you said, I'm sorry, this job's not working out, you're out of here. What is your story that you always go back to oh, no?
Okay. So I wasn't thinking about a dismiss somebody. I was thinking about some crazy situations that I had.
Sure.
Dismiss somebody. Well, I think probably because teaching is a very different animal than, let's say, other professions. And people go to school to become teachers, as opposed to people who might go to school to go into business or finance. And there's lots of different things you can do in that field. And I think teaching is just such a different mindset. So a lot of times people will come and kind of throw their hat in the ring or their resume on the table, so to speak, and they'll often just believe that, well, I have the qualifications, I'm a certified teacher, so I have the qualifications to work here. And often for us, that's not the case, because they're also then used to being handed something and saying, here, teach this. And in our model, there's not really something to hand them. You have to, like I said earlier, problem solve. You have to think it through. You have to be an examiner. And it's a very different way than most individuals who went into teaching are used to operating on. So I have many who are confused as to why they weren't qualified, quote unquote, to work this job, because they're a teacher and they have a piece of paper that says they're licensed. But I think the most difficult were in the early stages. We had a few people who came in and were kind of taking students on the side and talking to the parents, kind of like a little subterfuge there. And that was, I'm non-confrontational, so it just in my being. So that was always kind of awkward, because I was so disappointed that they would do that to us, and almost the disbelief that they had that, why is that a problem? The mom couldn't get to the center, so I said I would do it. And I'm like, no, that's not the way this works. So
you haven't had anybody overturn a desk or something when you let them go. No.
I've had a few students overturn desks, but not the teachers, no, not the professionals, no, not yet. I did have a one of our staff. We went on a conference down to Philly for a dyslexia conference, and we were going to an event as a group that night. One of the the cocktail party type events, but we were going as a team from Davinci. And she said, I just feel like walking. And this is like downtown Philly. And she felt like walking, and we lost her for 2 hours. And we had to call her husband, and we didn't want to make that phone call. Like, hi, we lost your wife. Any chance you heard from her? And when she came back, she was like, oh, I got lost. And she thought nothing of it. We were all like drained and losing it. And that was the craziest situation, where her reaction was just like, what?
Like the adult field trip gone horribly wrong.
That's exactly right.
Well, in her defense, I've lived outside Philadelphia for about 20 years now. I'm lost every day. So.
And you know what? She wasn't a spring chicken, and she wasn't agile either. So we were really nervous that something happened.
Like she was going to come back and somebody would have grabbed her and tattooed the Philly Fanatic to her shoulder or something.
I mean, it could have been. It could have been anything at that point. For sure.
Goodness. So you were going to share a story. So was that the story you wanted to share about kind of the...
Yeah, that one was the fun. If I had time to think on and on, I probably could come up with some really great. The student stories are always the best, and those are so super genuine, that when you reach a kid and the kid doesn't even, it's so organic at times. that they literally will like look up from their paper with these like wide eyes and realize I'm reading. Wait, I'm reading. And they didn't even maybe 100% know that they couldn't do that before, or they did, but they didn't realize what that meant. So
Right.
we've had a lot of aha moments with students, and that is always feel good. That is always feel good. But yeah, I would say the biggest issue that we have is that this teaching job that we do is different than what you would think of as a typical teacher. And it's not easy to find the person to fit that role. And so you second guess yourself, and you second guess whether this is a doable thing in the first place, because it's so hard to find that person. But I think what I'm finding now, and with a little bit of help from Larendee too, is that this job is worthy, and it is a job that people would want to come to. And first you have to define what it means to you and what the job is really. And I don't mean just a job description, but the purpose of this job that we do. And then it's a lot easier to sell it to people who might want to do something different. There are other people like us out there. We just have to know what that is.
Well, let me ask you, because our topic on this first show is about how everything, because of Corona, is either turning virtual, or there's people who've never worked virtual before who are doing it for the first time. You being in the education system, right now everybody has gone through virtual school. I have 3 kids in school. It's a mess, I can tell you. What are your thoughts on the whole school going virtual, and any idea of what they can do to make this better?
So what's your question again? I lost you for a second. I heard most of it.
The whole virtual school thing right now. How do you think this could be done better, or
okay,
this could be the new norm?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is that even with my staff that maybe was slightly ahead of the curve, it goes back to what I was saying about this problem-solving model. What we've realized is that all problems have already been solved. And that you have to believe something is true and that you can do it, and then the possibilities are endless. So I think my staff, as progressive as they may have been in their own minds, are light years ahead of that now. And there's a lot more aha moments for them they can't even we can't do that come out of their mouth anymore. And it might start to say, well, how could we do that? Or we can't do that. That has to, dial back now, and we're not doing that anymore. So it's exciting to me, because it's just, everything is at your finger. Every possibility is out there. And if we could figure out all of this and not have to try to wedge our way in, but also kind of we're in front of the horse instead of behind it, right? So it's pretty good. It's pretty neat right now. I think our market, of course, is opened 100%, right? So we're worldwide in an instant, right? We could be accessibly worldwide in an instant. So that's great. I think part of what we need to do is professional development, to answer your question specifically, in getting teachers to think that way. And that might be the heavier lift, the more cumbersome task, so to speak, that teachers had to, in a blink, change their whole perspective, and the whole paradigm shift was immediate. It wasn't gradual. But I tell you, we've been fighting that fight for a long time, trying to get them to shift their thinking, and there was a lot of pushback on that. And a lot of that saying of, well, this is what we've always done, or this is what always worked before, so why change it? And I think that has truly turned itself on its head. And that's exciting, because they can't say we can't do it anymore either.
So, Kerry, when you first started your business, you have a story about, you call it kitchen drawer economics.
Yeah.
Would you share that with us? And in some ways, you kind of had to go back to kitchen drawer economics a little bit with this new way.
Well, I think that, my mindset and my friends, we had a bit of fearlessness about us, and we were, daring. And I didn't feel as though I ever was confined to a lane or confined to this is the life you chose, so now just go, live it. So when I was teaching in the school districts, and really when I became a dyslexia specialist, I learned about how brains work, and I learned about problem solving, and really that dyslexia work that I had gone through opened my eyes in a certain way to really learning. You could teach anybody anything if you can help them learn how they learn, then they can do anything. So I knew that the confines of a school district for me was not the right thing. And I didn't know if it was going to be successful or not. But my friend Elaine and I always joked, we had 2 husbands with good insurance, and they both were our biggest cheerleaders. And they would just say, yeah, you girls should do it. You should do it. You've got a lot of guts. Go do it. And it was never a question. It was never I don't know, this is going to be hard. What about our paycheck? They just went, go do it. And we left these tenured jobs. And in the beginning, we just said, let's just go. Let's just leave. We can tutor and we can, make some money, and we'll figure out what's next. I had a dream of being able to open up some type of, I don't know if it was going to be a learning center, but it was going to be something that we could provide. I knew that more of what we were doing needed to be out there. I just didn't know how it was going to happen. And so we started the business, and we were both tutoring in our homes, and we got a call from a school district, and they said, whatever you girls are doing out there, we want some of that. So can you train our teachers? And we said, yeah, of course we can. So I threw my son, who was an infant, in the car seat, and she threw her 8-year-old daughter, and we drove out to Riverhead, and we got a DBA. We didn't know how to name for the business. The lady at the office said, well, what's the name of your business? And we looked at each other and said, oh, yeah, L&M. L&M is good because I'm Leo and she was McCallie. L&M, and that's who we were. And we realized, because the school district wanted to pay us, that we needed to have a bank account. So that's when we said, oh, this is kitchen drawer economics. We just, while the baby's on the counter and we're stirring the sauce and we're writing the checkbook out of the drawer, and, we went to the Small Business Association. We tried to get help, but we were really sewing this together with the threads that we found. There was no real model that we were using, even though we were in a part of our brain trying to find one. We just kept plowing along. We kept plowing through and saying, we'll figure it out as we go. There's a bit of magic, and I have to say, and it had to do with our relationship with each other, that the trust that we had, and we were seamless in our back and forth with each other. I trusted what she brought to the table. She trusted what I brought to the table, and we ebbed and flowed well together. I talked to other business owners, and they all, honestly, the first bit of advice I got, and I got it numerous times, was don't have a partner if you don't need one. Do you really have to have a partner? And that was just a no-brainer for me, because in my opinion, I needed her foundation, because she supported me and told me everything that we could do was right. And she needed to do something else, and it had a different direction. So I was providing that direction for her, that creativity piece for her that she wrote along with. So the partnership was successful, and the kitchen drawer economics worked. We just slide the baby over, write the check, and we split it halfway. Finally, yeah, it was
make
fun.
More sauce and make more sauce.
And we did. We really did.
What you've been doing ever since, right?
That's what we've been doing ever since. Yeah.
Making more sauce.
I'm going to go off script a little bit, because I just thought of something interesting. And for full disclosure, and I'll share this, when I was 16, I was diagnosed with dyslexia. And even as a successful adult, some of the signs are still there. Yeah. I will try to spell a word 9 times. By the 10th time, I switch the word. If you tell me your left is my right, I will stare at the wall in confusion. And when someone says your left or right, I can't do it without looking like I'm looking for silverware. For the parents out there, what are some of the early signs?
Early signs. Well, we often look at from a speech and language perspective. There are things that you can look at when you're specifically talking about dyslexia. It's mostly in the world of phonological awareness, like how you hear sounds. They don't have to go hand in hand, but you often will have that they can't string sounds together, they can't blend sounds together, they don't hear the rhymes sometimes that we would hear. So the phonological awareness, which is a pre-reading skill, because there's no sounds, or there's no symbols yet, letter symbols when you're doing that. We look at that and we say, are there weaknesses in that? Do they hear all the syllables? Can they pronounce all the parts of a word? We always like to look at, like how we watch little kids develop language when they say the Pledge of Allegiance, right? And they say, "For Richard stands." Or I always tell the story that my daughter once said, "Mom, can I watch this show on Disney? It's on 8/7 Central." Like, that was just one thing. There was no meaning to that, So there's all this development of language that happens in normal development, that kids will start to isolate and segment and break those things into parts. And with students with dyslexia, that often is delayed a little bit more. They're typically bright kids. They can be of average intelligence, of course, too, but they typically have this intelligence, and you would be expecting that their language and learning skills would be catching up with their intelligence, and it's not quite there. There's typically hereditary. So the first question I ask a parent is there anybody else? Is there anybody, was Aunt Betty or Uncle Phil a bad speller? Like, you could usually find it. It's highly hereditary. And then when you're starting to get into the symbol word, kids can do one of two things. They can either be overly phonetic, so you sound out every word. And so reading becomes so effortful that you don't want to do it. Or they could be the kids who just memorize so many words that in the early stages of kindergarten and first and second grade, they are looking like they're reading because they love books and they love stories and they can memorize a certain amount of words. But then when all of a sudden there's just too many words for you to memorize, it hits like, parents think it hits like a boom, but it really was there the whole time. They were not phonetic at all. So you don't have to reverse anything, but there are many who will say stories similar to yours, Bob, that I have this kind of directionality piece that's a little bit off. And that just has to do with the brain and the efficiency within the brain of certain hemispheres and how they communicate with each other. But there's one methodology that has been proven to help students learn to read who are dyslexic, and that's been around for over almost 100 years now. So that Orton-Gillingham methodology is the one that we use. There's a lot of different programs. There's many different programs underneath that umbrella, but we do know what parts of the brain are firing or misfiring or miscommunicating. And we now know with new science how that we can change the brain to work more efficiently, and we can make even a 45-year-old become a more functional reader than they might have been. So that's the good news. Our brains are more plastic than we ever thought before.
Well, I'll tell you, the best invention for us dyslexics is the GPS.
Yeah.
Because you can ask my wife, you can ask my family back in the day, directions, and I still get lost all the time here. Like, I think right now I am 25 years late for an interview I have. Because I have phone, but the whole GPS system is the greatest thing ever to happen, in my opinion.
So I also want to move to, because Kerry, your organization is now, you have a new program that's going to be launching very soon where you'll be offering services to adult executives.
Yeah.
So executives who are in very meaningful, high-functioning positions where they may be struggling.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit more about that program.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was something that we've always done, but it was more like by these very random requests. So we were always available for adults. And I have worked with adults who are 45, 30. I have some great stories. I remember this one gentleman came in, he was 45, very successful businessman. And he said to me, listen, I've got a secretary. I don't write my own letters. I tell her what I want to write, but she writes my own letters. She does all this stuff for me, but I want to know. I'm successful. I don't need this to continue to be successful. I need this for myself. And I remember when I was teaching him the most basic of like beginning spelling rules. And there's about 7 of them that we want people to know. And this was the one where you have like 2 L's at the end of will or 2 S's at the end of kiss. There's a bonus, we call it the bonus letter or the floss rule. But I remember telling him this rule and he was just astonished. And he took his paper and he lifted it up and he's like, does everybody know this? Everybody knows this. How come I don't know this? Like, it was just so, just his reaction was so authentic, but it was just so elementary for us to go, wait, you don't know this? How could you have gotten through school and not know this? And those kind of reactions, I do enjoy working with adults like that. But when you take that model and you say, again, going back to this problem solving thing, if you can learn how you learn, then you can overcome what you are perceiving as obstacles. So first things first is we have to go and kind of, profile that out for you. This is who you are. And this is how you are the most efficient and the most effective. And it's like life coaching, but for learning, right? Mm-hmm. And so, that's something that, and again, I think going back to that gentleman's example, what he perceived as a weakness nobody else would have ever known, but it was the first thing that walked in the room for him. And so he was living with this, I don't want to be found out and I don't want to be uncovered, even if it was something that 10 people in the room would have said, oh, I'm the worst speller in the world too. You only think it's you. So I think that once you lift the iron curtain of shame about some of those things and you realize that everybody learns differently. We call it cerebrodiversity.
Love that.
Do you like that? Yeah. Yes, right. Diversity, neurodiversity is, we don't want any 2 brains to think alike. And that's why you hear about all these super famous people who say they embrace their dyslexia because it really was the thing that they believed that opened up a whole new world for them. Because instead of walking one step in front of the other straight ahead, they were able to take this wider route around and see a little bit more of the world than what their peers were seeing.
It's one of your mottos, helping students learn how they learn best.
That's right. That's our tagline.
Right. And can be applied also in the executive world where so many executives and employees are asked to function at a very high level. And without this understanding, they're a bit kind of like one hand tied behind their back and you open the door.
Yeah.
For them.
And I think when we do student learning profiles, so when we do evaluations and assessments for students even, and we can do this for adults the same way, what we usually present to them, and I always present to the students as well as the parents and the school district, is here's what you're good at. Here's where you are, and here's where you're just like everybody else. And my students usually have more things that they're good at, or they're at least right there in the pool with everybody else, than they do this 1 or 2 things that aren't their greatest, prize. And so it really does kind of take the pressure off of them to say, oh, wait a second, everybody, I'm doing this just like everybody else. Yes. So how can we help you get there? Mm-hmm. And that's the same thing for adults. It's exactly the same thing, and I think adults too feel more of a responsibility to hide it and to work harder, not smarter, right? to use the coined expression. Mm-hmm. So I think even if you just open the gate for them to say, yeah, this is your profile, this is how you learn, they're already in a better situation.
Right. That self-awareness.
Yeah.
Kind of unlocks the door.
Yeah.
Kerry, what are some of your favorite or best success stories you've had?
Oh, my favorite. Okay. So I had one student, and he gives me full permission to talk about him all the time. He's one of my favorites, Mike. And Mike was a high school student, or he was in 9th grade when he first came to us. And we did this kind of brief screening to profile him out a little bit and see what was going on with him. And both of his parents were doctors, and he was a smart kid, and he was on the sailing team, and he was the lacrosse player, very well-spoken. And he came in with his mom, and he said, well, I've been diagnosed with dyslexia, but he was in honors classes because he knew who he was, but he wanted to get over it. And I remember that was one of the first cases where I was able to be very discreetly diagnostic with him. I was able to really go through and say, I'm not just kind of rubber stamping, we did this test, we did this test, we did this test, here's what you look like. We were really digging, and we were doing it together because he was invested enough to want to know. It wasn't being done to him like my parent dragged me here, And so what we found out that he was dyslexic, but he was so bright that he plowed through a lot of it. And what would happen was he would read, if he read in his own head, he would lose his place. He would lose where he was, as he was reading, he would skip over lines. He would just start tuning out and very, very typical. Dyslexia and ADHD kind of go together. I don't think he was diagnosed with ADHD, but he had those symptoms. And what we realized, I said, step one, I was like, okay, read out loud. Like, let's just get over that, and what I need to teach you is that when you need to look at text and be able to figure out, is this something I can handle by myself? Is this something that maybe I should listen to because it's long and lengthy and wall-to-wall text? Or is this something that I'm going to do in like a team of people with peers, like reading Shakespeare? Nobody except for real theater lovers or, real English majors like my daughter love reading Shakespeare. But there's really great lessons to be learned there. That's better to do in class with a dialogue where you get to see people going back and forth instead of reading that text in your bed at night. Like that would be really hard for him to lose like that ping pong back and forth between like a play, right? But there was certainly, he loved social studies. It was one of his favorite subjects. So he liked stories. So when he would look at something that was like social studies related, he would gobble it up. So, okay, that I can read. And when he would read something in English, I remember they were reading the Odyssey. And then they also read some Thoreau, Henry David Thoreau. I mean, when you read any of Thoreau's work, it's like 2 pages long of a paragraph with 2 commas and 2 periods. Like everything is so long and clauses after clauses. So for him, I was like, for that one, buddy, you just got to listen to it, or maybe Edgar Allan Poe. So the greatest success, I said, and he'll say this now, he's in his 30s now, and he went to Tufts University, and he has an MBA, and he said, you just taught me how to know myself and how to know this text and not try to, I'm going to plow through this because I'm going to work hard and this is my albatross. I got to read through it. You don't. You just need to be able to assess it and say, well, how do I want to get through this text? And that was, as he told me, one of the greatest things we could do for him. I've got a few of them. I have my boy I talk about all the time, Nick, who was the great. Nick, we said, had like that trifecta of dyslexia, ADHD, and some memory weaknesses. So you can imagine going through high school or middle school, and every 40 minutes you change classes. And just keeping up with the text was hard enough, let alone having ADHD where you're distracted by a pin drop, and your memory weaknesses where you want me to change classes and in 4 minutes leave what we just did in social studies and then walk into math and remember what we did 24 hours ago in math class. Like, meanwhile, the math teacher just teaches math all day long. So they don't have to do that, but these kids have to do that. So he was always putting up the defenses. I used to say when he came to the center, he would walk in and he would call me Kerry, and he'd say, oh, Kerry, I had such a bad day. Oh, you don't understand. I'm so tired and I was up late. And he just was like, we used to say, he was putting up the bricks of defense wall in front of himself. So in case he stunk, in the session, that was the reason why. And then I gave him some control and I said to him, listen, I know you're dyslexic and I know you have fluency issues. You don't read fast. So we're just working on that. Like a marathon runner would run a little bit every day. So I'm going to give you the control. And I taught him how to record the time and how we did the formula. And he didn't do it any differently than he normally did, but he had the control, so it wasn't being done to him. And the very next day, he came in. I gave him the timer. I said, "You go. Here we go. Time it." And he's like, "It was bad, right? Wasn't it bad?" I said, "No, you read 130 words per minute. That's 2 words faster than yesterday." And he goes, "Okay, let's do another one. Can we do another one?" And that was it. He got it. He still had to do work, but he was willing to come. The obstacle, the wall was down, and he knew that he had the tools to do it. And that really, if we can get a kid or an adult to that place, then the teaching is easy. The teaching is super easy. You just have to break down their walls. And those Bob, are those success stories you're asking about, the ones where we finally got them to see their own worth and that they were going to be able to be successful.
So in the workplace, we have that too, that employees want help figuring out themselves. And so how great it is when we can have employers who are willing to help employees do that self-discovery and help them find the way that they can work best. And I know, Kerry, in addition to being an educator, you're a CEO of a company, and you indirectly supervise over 35 people. You directly supervise, I think, 7 individuals. So how do you help your employees do that self-discovery and find themselves so that they can bring that spark to their job and to your overall organization?
Yeah, and that's something we've been working on very intensely over the last year. I think I've always been trying to do that. And I think for me, it's always that I had a belief in what we were doing. And because they were sitting there at the table with me, I had a belief that they could do it. And so because I was cheerleading them along the way, there was never... I could have felt disheartened, but I never felt defeated when they weren't getting my message, or they weren't getting the message that I wasn't giving out the message, I should say, that I thought I was to them. So I do think that it's about responsibility, and that I give them ownership of a lot of the things that we're doing, so that they feel that when they achieve it, it's a huge reward. I always say success with my students even as well, but with the teachers, success breeds success. So when I let you go and they go and handle a meeting on their own and it comes out great, they're not coming back to me and asking me for more money. They're coming back because they can't wait to share the story of how successful they were. Mm-hmm. And they can't wait to do another one. And I think we get a lot of those moments, and we've been getting more, because the more authority over themselves I give them, I think the more that they are stepping up. But it does come from a belief that what we're doing is good and altruistic and honorable and worthy. But I also believe that they can do it. Sometimes I believe they can do it more than they believe it themselves.
I love that. You said belief in who they are, belief in what you as a company are doing, giving them ownership and helping them remember that success breeds success. Really powerful foundation.
Yes, success breeds success. And honestly, that's what makes my job so great, because there's no way anybody is going to try to convince me, or will be able to convince me, that what we're doing isn't worthy and necessary and helps people, because we see it every day. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there are setbacks and there are people who are pushing back. But every time we get one of those, we get maybe an educator who says, "What do you know?" Or "Why should I listen to you?" Or we have a failure communicating a need of a parent, or, when those things happen, they are gut wrenching. But, I always say, let's go back to the table and say, okay, they might be wrong and they might be misunderstanding, but what can we do to help them? Because that's what our job is. What can we do better the next time, so that, they can understand? Because we really believe in what we do, it makes it easy. You're not, whatever. I think there's things you've told me about that too, Larendee, like the belief in your product. Mm-hmm. They do believe in it. They do. They don't know how valuable it is sometimes, but they do believe in it, Well,
you truly are a CEO who does a great job of believing in your team members, even when they can't believe in themselves. And I think that's really the mark of a true mentor and a leader that individuals want to follow, that you'll hold out that belief in their ability to contribute to the team in a meaningful way, even when they can't see within themselves. And employees are hungry for that in this day and age. So,
well, you've taught me a lot about the universe too. And I think that if people were put in your path for a reason, then sometimes I just have to make sure that they know that, and that, you know, when they feel like they can't do something or nobody could, you know, that's impossible. You know, I have to think like, you know, of course you can, you know, of course you can do that. And because you're here, and that's the whole reason why you're here in the first place. Right. So,
right. Amazing. Yeah. So Bob had a kind of a closing fun question for you.
Okay. And we're here with Kerry Leo, founder and CEO of Davinci Education and Research. Now, to finish this, we're going to have a little fun here. We have a few stranded island questions, but after the last few months, it feels like we're in a stranded island anyway, doesn't it?
It does.
Kind of like a stranded island with Chinese delivery. But we're putting you on the stranded island now. I'm going to ask you a few things. You have one food or one type of food to bring with you. What's it going to be?
Oh, gosh, one food or one type of food. I would probably bring Italian food just because I don't really get sick of that. I don't know if that's a kind of food, but anything you would order from, like, you know, Gino's or something. Yeah, it's safe to me.
They'll drop it off on the island every day. How about a book? One book you have to read over and over.
Oh, gosh. This is an easy one. I love the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon. That was a book that it's a fiction book, but it changed my way of looking at novels and writing, and it set me on a path to write myself. So the Outlander series, it's a show on Stars now. So but the books are outrageous. They're the best.
One TV show.
So one TV show. Well, maybe The Office. I never get sick of watching that. It cracks me up.
All right, two more. One movie.
The Princess Bride. Done.
Yeah.
And not only do you get to listen to one album or one person's songs or one group's songs the rest of the time, they will be on the island with you. Who will it be?
Oh, you said that question differently. It's not. Okay, well, if it's going to be one music that I can listen to in person, then I'm going to have to say Prince. Just because his music is so versatile. But I was going to say either Bob Dylan or Sting, because if I was going to bring to talk to somebody, I think that they could, on this desert island, either one of them could teach you how to find your higher self, and you're by yourself there or with them. So we're going to go do some meditation and try to while the time away. One of those two guys could probably help you get through it.
Do you realize that people find out Bob Dylan and Prince are on your stranded island, there are going to be a lot of planes coming in to get there. That's Kerry Leo, founder, CEO of Davinci Education and Research. Where can people find out more about you or your company?
Oh, okay, sure. At our website at davincicenter.net. And we're located in St. James. We have a Facebook page. We've got an Instagram page, all with Davinci Center. We have a YouTube channel kicking off very soon. Be on the lookout for us. Pretty heavy social media presence now, so you can find us on most places through Davinci Center. And of course, through the website, you can link right through to that as well.
Well, thank you for being our first guest, and we hope to have you on again soon.
I hope to be there. Absolutely. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Kerry.
Thanks.
The show has been engineered and mixed with original score by Mark Ruse. Please follow us and interact with us at workwithmepodcast.com. Copyright 2020, Ruse Advisors.